sometimes beating happens because of frustration, not correction. I think that the child has frustrated you, you cannot get to them, so you hit them. I'm not saying this is good or this is bad, but if the intention is frustration, then correction is not taking place there. Children can explore spirituality at a very young age. However, we need to understand that it might not be fully formed at that age, and so the expectations should not be too high. I had my dad, who was close to an atheist, and then I had the other aspect, was my mom, who was a devout religious Christian. I think that was what kind of helped me find a balance, and that's why I really push for children learning skills. I believe that you are in your head about what you want your child to know, but what you really want them to know is to have the skills to learn, relearn, unlearn, and to build by themselves.
Hi people, today we're on to another episode of our podcast, and we have a special guest here today that will be walking us through what it takes to raise a child that is well adjusted. Let's even talk about our children. I mean, it's a very important part. But, as a parent, I have also seen the challenges of raising a child, being present enough for them. And I don't think we have enough tools to navigate the world of parenthood. This episode will help you to understand how to live that. And when we talk about spirituality and children, it doesn't have to always feel contrived. And it can also be something that the children can enjoy. Pause with us, you get to meet our guest after this short break. Awazie, Ngozi, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So, Ngozi, you know that I'm so excited you're here because I remember the first time we had a chance to talk and you were sharing perspective. But I wanted to check with you, did you always think you end up working with kids? Was it something you always saw coming?
Okay, well, when I was very young, I used to arrange my dolls and teach them. Yes, and I remember starting off saying I wanted to be a teacher, and I remember my parents telling me, do you want to be poor? And so I quickly switched that career path because no one wants to be poor. But over time, I still find myself coming back to this teaching career, even in church. Then growing up, I started working with the children so early as a teenager. And then I started counseling teenagers as well. And then I would find myself around places where, children are sitting together and learning. And I just knew that it was something I was going to do. Of course, this pathway is not always very straight. So when I did come out of school, I thought I was going to do something else very important with my life.
Did you work in any organization for any bit?
It didn't work out because I remember when I did have this back and forth, what dropped into my spirit was, you're just a very dedicated person. If you start any career path, you wouldn't leave it. You just stay dedicated to it. So I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to even, try something for a few months or a few weeks, So I remember every single job that I applied for didn't work out. I remember applying for a company that said it would take 2 weeks before they would get our emails sent to us. And as I was coming out of the door, I got my email. I was like, come on, this is just not fair. I literally just wrote the exam a few minutes ago. But eventually there was this program that was running where we had to write an essay about how education could be a catalyst for growth and, safety. And I remember my elder brother came across it and he said, write. And I was like, please write it for me. I don't want to do it. And he was like, no, write it yourself. And when I did, I got connected to a group of people who had this CSR that they were doing to train teachers, into schools. So basically they trained us for 4 months and then they had schools come to check us out. And that's pretty much where the official start of my career happened.
So interesting. And I think that for how many years now have you been in a class?
I've been in class for about 12 years now, 12 to 13 years, truly, because I did start very young.
That's a lot. Sure. But looking at raising children and looking at how we were raised, I mean, recently you were talking about the International Baccalaureate model. I wanted you to speak to how curriculum is changing and why the world the curriculum of the last world can no longer cater to the world that we now live. And I mean, at some point in our days, if you were not in a Montessori school, you were missing out. And now it's not just Montessori. If you can walk us through how this IB model is different from Montessori, the conventional model of learning. Let's get some education in that.
So I think, and it was popularly said that education was designed for factory workers at the beginning. So it was a traditional system where you just had to learn how systems work, and how to be able to properly obey instructions whenever you went into the workforce. But over a period of time, and this is not new, really, all of this, Montessori, IB, if you check their start dates, they're very, very old concepts. It's just that they started
They're not popularized at the time.
Exactly. They started to become popular recently when we have a new generation of parents that are looking for something different. And mostly the change in education starts to happen when parents start to ask for something else. So we have the traditional system, and then parents want to travel their kids outside the country. So then schools start to bring in different curriculums, like, we run a British system, or we run like an American curriculum. Just keep your child here. You understand? Like, we have these affiliates or connections and things like that. And then over time, parents are like, this structure is not working for my children. They're too straight jackets, staying in one place. We need something more free-spirited, free thinking. And then you start to see things like the IB system come into place. And of course, the one I explained to you about, which really blew my mind, the democratic education. So now basically the difference is really the methodology and the philosophy. The facts still remain the same in terms of what the children are supposed to learn, how, when, and where the children learn it is pretty much what changes. So in the American curriculum, they always usually start out the children easy. They want to build more curiosity, free spirit nature in the children. So they're more or less like exploring and experimenting, and so they continue to do this to a particular point where they feel the children are mature, and then they start to and they start to bombard them. So at one point in the American curriculum, you start to discover that your child doesn't know anything. And then you start to panic, but they're a lot more, how do I put it? They're a lot more communicative. They're able to speak up their minds. They know what they want, but they don't have
the full grasp of the basic concepts,
the depth of what they're talking about. And the British curriculum is a lot more spaced, structured. I think that the system works in a way where the children are given a lot more information starting very young, so that by the time they grow, it's not too much for them to absorb. But then it comes in different ways. They have their different methodologies, but it's still fact-centered in the sense that the children are learning about the different things that they need to learn for their system. And I did explain at one point that these curriculums were designed for their society and what they believed that the society needed. Of course, the inquiry model came into place when they were trying to find out how to marry the concepts of facts being passed down to the children and skill set that they need to learn. Because sometimes you can get too stressed with one part as a teacher, and they need to pass their SATs or their IGCSEs, so I just focus on how much facts that they can...
the technical, memorizing the factoids.
Exactly. And so the inquiry model was to see what you could get out of the child. It's a lot more child-centered. It's saying that children are not designed the same way, so they shouldn't have the same program. They should be able to build a system that is centered on what they want to learn, what they love to learn, their interests, and still doing that or using that as a lens to learn about the environment and the society and the things that the society wants them to learn. So it's more or less like bringing them onto the table to say, okay, come and become a co-designer of what the learning is supposed to be.
So would this capture what we mean when we say how can a decolonized curriculum look like for us Africans? Because a lot of our education, at least for the past 100 years, have really come from our colonial heritage. But for a decolonized curriculum, what would that look like?
So to deal with that, you have to start with what you're testing for.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, for my school, for example, we run all the way to like a year 3. And so because of that, we are also conscious of the facts because we're looking at what the children will be tested for when they move on. So if you're building such curriculum, you're asking yourself, what am I going to test this child for at the end of the day? If that concept doesn't change, no matter how you want to change the process or the structure, the child will still end up being stressed about what they're going to be tested for. And this is why no matter how you try to change or restructure what the African curriculum should look like, as long as they're still tested for what they're tested for, it always falls back to
Memorizing
affecting.
factoids.
Exactly.
So, okay, but again, how do we measure if we don't test? Is there a learning that can allow us to, we know that they know without having to test whether they know?
So again, you cannot throw away the baby with the bathwater. Testing is important. It's important not just for the learner, but also for the teaching and the learning process and for the community as well. You need to be able to reflect on what you're learning. What needs to change is the narrative of what is being tested. So for example, in an inquiry model structure, if a child gets an answer correct, they might not be praised as much as if they took a step further in their process. Oh, I see that you're communicating a lot better. I see that you're using the sentence stems for your presentation. I can see that you're now managing your time when you're working. When you start to test children on that, then they start to work on those concepts, as opposed to say, you get 10 over 10. I got 10 over 10. Oh, you're very brilliant. You got 100%. So as long as the focus is dependent on the outcome as opposed to the progress, the children will continue to train towards the outcome.
Okay, what goes through how language evolves? If we are doing an outcome-based communication, and how do we, a child, I know it's first, second, third, fourth, is very brilliant, average, I don't know, I'm poor. I'm fail. So those are the languages on the outcome. But then you're talking about a progress-based model. How, for us parents and teachers, how will that reflect on our language to communicate that to that child in the context of progress?
So if everyone is focusing on progress, for example, there's a new structure of report cards that we do in the system that I work in the sense that the children do not have positions. First of all, we do not have first, second, third positions because that's a comparison-based system where they are trying to look at between themselves and the rest of the class.
So we're almost programming them into an unhealthy competition, almost a low self-esteem if they're not measuring up.
Exactly. And the flip side also is to be able to determine your worth based on a room when you could be more than the room.
Is there a scientific basis to now say when we eliminate grading system, the kids are well adjusted?
I would say again, rewrite the structure of what you're grading. The system itself is not the problem.
I see what you
it's
mean now.
the outcome of what it does to the child. So if a child sees or thinks in terms of numbers or comparison, that is how they would continue to build their growth within. But if they see it in terms of their learning concepts, so I can see that in your mathematics, you are, extending your learning, or you are beyond the expected level of learning, or you are deepening in your understanding, or you're secured, or you are working towards a learning structure. It helps them see mistakes as being okay. It helps them see asking for support because I'm working towards how can I get to expected level. So it's about you and your learning growth as opposed to saying within the whole class of 20 people, you're first.
So it's not a one size fits all.
Exactly.
It's being able to customize and sort of personalize the growth track for every child.
Yes, it's still the same system that they're working towards. For example, right now at the state that we're in, because of what they're being tested on, they would still be learning parts of speech, for example, nouns, verbs, adjectives. Like, we're not going to throw that away and say, oh, you look more like a construction worker. Let's work on construction. Or you look more like this, let's work on that.
So right now it's a blend within the accreditation model that we have.
So what we're not changing is not the facts. It's how the children perceive their growth within the facts. So if we're all learning parts of speech, I'm saying, okay, I'm not saying that you got 20 over 20 and you got 10 over 20 and you're like, Olodo in the class, you got 0/20. I'm more or less saying that, okay, I can see that you are familiar with the concepts of your parts of speech. So what you need to work on, and then it gives them something to step on. What you need to work on is identifying them within sentences or applying them in your own sentences when you're writing. Can you use a lot more adjectives in your writing as opposed to just writing simple sentences? So now we tell them, this is where you're at. This is the next step, in your learning. This is the next step in your progress. So they become more, they have a voice in their learning. They have choice because they know what they're working towards, and they're able to own their learning. So in that point, you have children who are even able to tell their parents, right now, I am able to do this, but I'm working on doing this. As opposed to being told you got 0/20 because you didn't get 20 questions correct. And those 20 questions are biased, subjective, and dependent on what the teacher decided to, set at that period in time, not necessarily the cumulative of what you're able to do with the subject.
So let me start by, what is education to you? How would you describe an educated child or education for a child?
Okay, so I always say that education is more than the facts. It's a child who is able to navigate facts with an intentional concept in mind while building skills over time. And there are different skill sets that children are supposed to build as they grow, because facts are always changing. Like, I know we've had the conversation before, where we said the atom was the smallest unit, and then now they told us it wasn't the smallest unit anymore.
There's something in the atom.
That child who didn't get that right that day, it is past. They moved on, they failed biology. But now, it's not that anymore. So it's not a function of how much facts you are able to acquire or how much knowledge you're able to build. It's what you're able to do with it, how you're able to apply, what skills you're able to. Exactly. And so again, it's not a language. So education is not, I can speak English properly. It's how bilingual, how multilingual am I? How am I able to communicate with different people? How can I communicate using sign language or gestures or, verbal cues when I'm presenting? So it gives the children a lot more stages to their growth and to help them understand that outside of school, what kind of learner am I? So even our 5 to 6 year olds can be able to tell you, oh, I learned better by listening, or I learned better by, visuals, or I learned better this way. And so that way it helps them to truly understand who they are in their society, and what they're capable of contributing to their society and their
So, I remember one of the Greek origin for education was the word edusire. And edusire talks about being able to bring out from within. And in the context of that, it says that a child really comes to the world with something to give to the world.
Exactly.
So that you have to equip the child's ability to think creatively, solve problems, and contribute to society, so that those things help education. But now, looking at the type of education that we have, it all looks like all of the education seems to be educating the mind, not the heart. I'm asking the question as to, have you been able to bridge the heart-mind divide? How do we embody a heart-led educational model that still equips you to think, but also to feel? So you're not just smart, you're empathy. You have empathy. You're not just intelligent. You're considerate. You have social skills. You're sensitive. You're discerning. You're able to sort of coordinate your existence around, because your life to the heart. Is there any model in this world that can equip a child to live from the heart as much as from the head?
So presently, this brings us back to the inquiry model that we run. I don't know if you've heard of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
So we have started to implement these into the classroom as well. So for example, the last unit that we ran was about the elements of the world. So we're looking at how the world works. And there are 4 elements: the wind, I'm going to speak in the voice of a 5-year-old. So there we have the wind, the fire, the water, and earth. Yeah. And so basically we were inspired by this Avatar and movie that,
Airbender.
Exactly. Exactly. And so what we did was, the concept that the children needed to learn was how the world works. What are the different things that help, in creating, restructuring, evolution and growth. And again, these are 5 to 6 year olds. And so they explored and researched the different elements, and where they came from and how they were invented and how they were not invented, and their possibilities and what they were used for. And so they worked through all of that, and that educates the mind. And then we bring in the SDGs So they have the 16 SDGs, and they have this beautiful video that they watched of a man, I think Steve Courts. The title is Man. You would love it.
I would check it out.
And it's amazing. He has so many, but okay, that aside. So they watched the video and they saw him, how he started, how he stepped on animals, how he, turned them into keyboards or pianos or, KFC chicken, and all of this, and cut down all the trees into paper and stuff like that. And it was so amazing to see that they were upset about different things. Some children were upset about how the animals were being treated. Some were upset about how the people were turned into lab, rats. Some were upset about the trees, and the paper. And so while they watched the video, they were supposed to take notes of things that upset them, things that made them sad. And then when they wrote those things down, they had to look at the 16 SDG goals and say which ones were connected to these particular goals. And because they were divided into the 4 elements, we imagined that we had a fire world. So we had a fire king and a fire queen, and we had the wind world, and they had a king and a queen. And so in your world, how would you solve this particular problem? So we had some people pick poverty because of all the dirt. People couldn't live properly, so they were very poor. They had no jobs. So how would you solve this problem? For them, electricity, and problems like that. So here it makes them start to become in tune with their heart, not just their mind. So I have all of this knowledge and have all of these ideas, but how can I use this to solve the problem of zero hunger or no poverty or quality education, and things like that. And that is really what birthed the program of how they started writing stories to couple them together in a book, sell the books to their parents. We used the money to build mushroom schools all over again from the ground, and they would visit and they would teach the children there. This is what the inquiry model does. It helps them to become connected to their local and global environment, as opposed to just sitting in the classroom and learning in isolation.
So this is interesting. I really think that there is so much in what you're saying, but just even thinking about spirituality for children. For many of us, we would go to Sunday school, we get to memorize scriptures, and you have to regurgitate it, like you keep about. A lot of people even said at the time, it wasn't like they were cutting through. So you were raised a Christian, but you were raised in any religion that you believe in. But again, it wasn't so much that you were connecting. So how do we communicate spirituality to a child? Do they need it even at that age, or they grow into it?
I would say that there's a popular saying that a child can learn different languages at a very young age. They are not yet, and some people say, it's because their brain, there's a science behind their brain, that their brain can acquire a lot. From my perspective, purely non-scientific. But from experience, I believe that at that point, there's some factors that haven't started to build strength within them, which is fear or embarrassment. They're still there, but they're not as strong as they would have been when they become adults. I don't know if you understand. So children are willing to make mistakes in language, get corrected, maybe even laughed at, and they never really, freeze up like adults. Like if you try to learn a language now and someone laughs at you, you're like, you know what, I'm sticking to English for the rest of my life. So I think that that's the same way with spirituality. I think that at this point, children can explore spirituality at a very young age. However, we need to understand that it might not be fully formed at that age. And so the expectations should not be too high. What we should focus on is giving them the tools and the skill set to be able to navigate spirituality eventually when their generation grows. Because at this point, we are speculating about what the future would be. We are assuming, we have so many assumptions, AI world, this world, that world, but we truly do not understand the depth of what life would be like for them, the way our parents didn't understand the depth of what life would be like, for us as well. And so at that point, what they truly need are tools that they can continue to use to build the kind of understanding that they need for themselves when they get to that point. And tools like asking questions, like what exactly is this? What does this mean? Reflecting, journaling, like tools that would help them to be able to make sense of what the Bible, what people, what society, what social media has to say about spirituality. So instead of shutting them out, it's first building structure and then allowing them to transition into the flow of the society that they're in. And then from there, assume a guide role in their lives to kind of help them to navigate it till they can run smoothly on their own.
So this is interesting, but again, I want you to walk me through your growing up years.
Okay.
And what have you unlearned about God now, but as a child, you struggled with?
So I would say unlearning would be a difficult pitch to have because I had two sides to spirituality. I had my dad who was close to an atheist. He was kind of somewhere there. I think that deep down, like, I always say like my boss now presently, I think that deep down there is that belief that there's a God, but maybe there's church hurt, something. Most times they've
not dealt with the healing.
Yes, exactly. And so they go towards, I'm a scientist and I believe in facts. I believe in what I can see with my two eyes, you understand? And then I had the other aspect, which was my mom, who was a devout religious Christian. She was like, church every day. We opened the church, we closed the church. We were not the pastors of the church. She went for every meeting, every service. We prayed every morning. We still had a conversation recently that the lady she's staying with refuses to wake up every morning for morning prayer. I think that was what kind of helped me find a balance, because I had this person who believed everything her pastor said, and I had this person who would always ask questions to question it, to make jokes. I always say my dad's favorite thing to sing was this song about Samuel being called, and he would come and he'd say, "It's not me that is calling you." I was like, why confuse such a young child? So he always questions things. Like, he wouldn't take things as they are. He would question them. He might not necessarily have had answers, but he would question them. And then, of course, my mom was like, memorize this. I was in cadet on parade. I had all of these things, wore uniform. Like, I was pushed into everything, choir, choreography, everything. Like, I did all. So I had I think that created sort of like a balance.
The best of both worlds, yeah.
In my mind. But one thing I would say is, because I was raised as a child who had to create peace for the family, I didn't really have someone that I felt was like my friend in the house. So this Holy Spirit was someone that I actually did start to build a relationship with from a very young age. And so even then, I wouldn't fully understand. Like, I don't think I truly understood union in terms of like what God wanted us to be, but I knew that God never wanted us to be afraid of him, because then I had those questions of, why would I want to serve a God who is always angry or always wants someone to be afraid of him all the time? Sometimes always in a bad mood. Your parents, out of the goodness of their heart, they want you to do something, you're not doing it. Like the traditional tales, they concoct a story to make you afraid. God is watching you, don't go and do what you are, things like that. So I think that I started to ask questions because of that kind of parent that I had. Like, why is it always like this? Why is it like that? Recently, I told someone the story of Ruth and Boaz, and how it was told to us was a lie. Because the Bible says there were seasons that passed and summers that passed. Time went before this relationship happened. But the way it was told, it was like he set eyes on her, and then they were in love, and then they married the next day. And it wasn't like that. So because of those questions, I had to go into the Bible for myself to start to find all those loopholes that, it's not, like that, or it wasn't like this, and it wasn't like that. So I would say, truly and honestly, unlearn was something I learned as a skill. This is what I know. But then I asked a lot of questions, and then I unlearn, and then I relearn, and it became like a skill set. So even up to now, I'm still open to learning things that are, focused on a foundation or a base, because it's a skill. And that's why I really push for children learning skills. I believe that you are in your head about what you want your child to know.
Mm.
But what you really want them to know is to have the skills to learn, relearn, unlearn, and to build by
Instagram.
themselves.
So really, I think I can't remember who said it, but someone had captured those words that the ability to learn, unlearn and relearn is what education means in the 21st century. But interestingly, I really think that to thinking about the way that kids today are showing up, we talk about trauma. As a teacher, have you noticed ways in which kids are being altered by, I don't know whether it's helicopter parenting, or there are different ideas, or tiger moms, or absent dads, but just from your own perspective, how do we know when a child is being traumatized? And what would be a response from the teacher, parent's perspective to help rescue the child?
I think that raising a child sometimes requires a community, because sometimes I
Takes a
feel
village.
our present structure of parenting right now is very isolated. Because of fear, because of trauma, from things that happened to the past. Nobody would touch my child except me. Sentences like that happen. And I'm not saying that those traumatic situations were not real. I'm saying that, again, we are not supposed to throw away the baby with the bathwater. And so when you're raising your child, there's this popular thing that we always say: the last child is raised by the first child, because by then the parents are tired. And, at that point, they're not ready to raise anyone. They just want someone to love. And so the child is spoiled beyond reason. But the first child that was, the experimental child that was raised like in any which way, now holds the key that, builds the last child up. And I think that just simply means that every parent has a blind spot.
True.
And we're always too fidgety and stressed about not wanting to have a blind spot. But the truth of the matter is that if we could do everything, we would not need people. So I don't think that we were really designed to do everything by ourselves, and that sometimes blind spots should be embraced. And that's where you have to build trust and systems and people that you know that if your child gets into a teenage rebellious stage and they're running to someone's house, they're running to Ngozi's house, I trust that things will work. Like, I don't have to encroach on that space. I don't even have to go and knock and say, give me my child. I just know that my values would be represented wherever.
And they're in safe hands and they'll be guided as well.
Exactly. And so when we meet these children, we see a lot of parents really trying to be everything for their child and not willing to see how the community can actually help them to raise, their child. Because I always tell parents that, children have different forms. We have children who are creatives and children who are patterned learners, for example, and children who maybe are very rebellious, because they want change, they're wanderers. And we have children who are just like, they want to support, they're the ones that talk about baby girl life. They don't want to do anything. They don't have a dream and aspiration, and it's stressing you as a parent because you want them to have a focus in life. And children have different personalities, but you always tend to identify the personality that you have in a child. So probably the child that you love the most or hate the most, it's one of the two, is the child that has a similar personality that you have. And so you might be equipped to raise that child, or maybe that child needs another perspective of their personality. And this is the reason why you cannot, do this by yourself. So understanding that children are different and they need different personalities in the process of their raising is something that is quite difficult to find now, in the environment that we're in, because we have a parent who's very protective or very on point, task oriented, trying to raise a creative child. And so if you're very task oriented and you're creating a schedule and a timeline and the child has no wiggle room, you're always going to fight, because the child is already in nature not someone who is just going to follow instructions just like that. They need to know that they're part of it. They need to know that they have a voice. Meanwhile, if you're a creative raising a pattern learned child and you're like, it's not going to work, because the child needs a structure. From structure, you can start to develop creative tendencies in the child, but the child's core is structure. And if you don't understand that, you would always be at each other's wits because of it. So one of the things that we see a lot are parents trying to project their dreams on children, even unintentionally. It's not like I intentionally want it, but you have to be very sportive, you have to be this. They have the trauma of their parents trying to project their dreams, so they know that they don't want to project their dreams, but somehow they project their dreams on their children. And we have parents who are not around and who have children who want attention, who want hugs, wants, one of my favorite moments with my dad, it's not even conversation. It's just the fact that he would sit with me and I would sit and we'd just be reading. We'd be reading different books. We wouldn't even be talking to each other, but we would be in the same room. Like, that was just it. So I also think that some parents have this tension that when they're around children, they have to engage them. They have to do stuff with them. They have to, be in their face. But sometimes it's very exhausting, even for an adult. Like, it's trying. It's a lot to expect. As a teacher, sometimes I even sit on my chair and I'm working and I just have a child who puts their head on my shoulder, and that's just it. Like, we don't even have to talk. We don't have to interact, nothing. They just want that feeling of there's someone here. And they might be going through maybe a nervous reaction or maybe a little bit of a panic attack, or maybe they're about to start something that is stressing them out and they just want something to ground them, that there's someone, there for them.
Just even seeing, I want us to talk about discipline.
Okay.
Right. I saw a video of a teenage boy who called cops on his grandmother in Canada. The grandmother slapped him and he called the cops on her. And his father was livid that he was returning to Nigeria. They're going to send him to Umaya Secondary School. Right. And at that point in time, I really kind of saw what the most modern parents are dealing with. My child is naughty, he's strong-willed, he's stubborn. Do I flog? Do I not flog? Again, there was a sense that discipline took away from a lot of adults today. Most of them were flogged for flimsy reasons. You woke up late, you're flogged. You pee on the bed, you're flogged. You're not doing well at school, you're flogged. So a lot of people have been traumatized by a discipline model that made them feel less and small and shameful and inadequate and not enough, not ready. We're now having to come to this extreme where we're now trying to say, okay, I don't want to beat my child because beating doesn't resolve. But where is the balance? Is there a place to beat but not beat too much? Or is there a place to, lean into the modern parenting of sit back and have a conversation and try to figure it out? But from your own experience as a teacher, where do we find that balance?
I always try to avoid the beating, the beating conversation, simply because I believe that discipline is a function of intention. And sometimes beating happens because of frustration, not correction. I think that the child has frustrated you, you cannot get to them, so you hit them, right? I'm not saying this is good or this is bad, but if the intention is frustration, then correction is not taking place there. And I would still say if you interview a lot of young people who grew up, with parents, the parents they feared the most was not the parent that beats them. It's the parent that spoke to them, that made them think about their life. My dad wasn't a hitter. We used to wonder if he was soft until the day he hit my brother and I discovered he didn't know how to beat. That was the problem. He didn't know the difference between beating a child and beating a man who I found, in bed with my wife. the gray area is very gray. So that's why he doesn't, beat us. But, when my dad spoke to you, it hurt worse than beating. You'd prefer your mom to find out about something you did wrong because she's just going to beat you and you're going to move on. And I think that it kind of tailors back to the whole sin, and union thing. It's like if there's a consequence for my action, I feel like I have paid my dues, as opposed to when I don't get that consequence, but instead I get something that makes me reflect on it. It's a lot harder. It's like a lot more work. I'd rather prefer just pay me back and let me go, instant gratification, and let me just go. If you want to discipline a child, I would say, I studied international relations and we say war is the last stage of negotiation. I think that beating is the last stage of any form of
if at all.
Like, I don't even subscribe to it because I have been teaching for 12 years and I've never hit a child. But I still have parents.
Have you been frustrated to the point where you got to almost beat a child?
I have been frustrated. I don't know if I was frustrated to almost beat the child, but I have been frustrated. And it's such a point where I walked out of the classroom. as such. But then I came back and I had a conversation because I also understand that children can, if a child loves you, and as a teacher, you wield a very important power because children see you as their mom, their counselor, their everything. And so at that point, actually at a very young age, they have this desire to impress and to please you, especially if they love you, the way my children love me. And so I'm very, very careful not to misuse that power because sometimes just being angry can make the child feel like, oh, I've upset Miss Sungers, even though it has nothing to do with them. And then they're trying to do things to please you. They're trying to behave themselves. I don't want the child to modify their behavior because of my emotions. Because it's very dangerous. What if I'm not even angry because of you? Do you understand? And then you start to second guess yourself. You start to fidget, It's not how you want a child to be raised.
And it almost, in a way, they become externalized in the way that I have to look around me to find if I'm okay. I have to tiptoe around people.
Exactly.
And somehow they perfect the art of just adjusting, compensating, hiding for who they are. But I really think that the discipline part is something we all wrestle with as parents. And sometimes you want to be able to see that you raise well-adjusted children who can speak truth power, but are not also in a point where they're belligerent and they're not able to be guided. So in a lot of ways, we wrestle with that. But one question, because we're coming a little bit to a close, but I wanted you to speak if you were president for a day, as they would say. What are the policies you put in place to make our education sector better?
If I was president for a day. Okay, before I come into that question, I also want to talk about the importance of communication.
Good.
I think that in terms of discipline, communication is very, very important. And I feel like no matter...
Communicating the why, not just the...
Exactly. And not just the why, but the expectations before the discipline. I feel like sometimes as adults, as parents, we assume that children should know what the expectations are because they're good or bad. They're good or evil. So they should know, so when you're correcting because can't you see that this isn't good, but not because you ever laid any structure in place to build that. You didn't co-design what the expectations are for the house. But you have expectations that the child should follow it because your word is law. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying always, negotiate what should be. There are non-negotiables and there are negotiables. But even then, the child should know these are non-negotiables.
So, in a sense, there are parents who just put out the law.
Yes.
And say, okay, nobody goes out by 8 o'clock and nobody comes late. So the kids are living in this context of a law was handed over to me, but I don't know why that law was made. You're not communicating to them. So it's important from your point that we don't just put laws on them. We invite them into the collaboration, into the conversation. So it's getting unsafe around the neighborhood. That family down the road was robbed. I think I'll feel better if you guys are in around 7, 8 p.m. And I'd rather you do indoor stuff, at least for now, pending where we can get a sense of how safe the environment can be. So the child is seeing that love is at work.
And if we're indoors, okay, instead of going to bed, can I do this instead?
Can we do games?
Can we do games? Can we have like game nights? Do you understand? Like if you design a timetable for a child, does the child have empty blocks where they can decide what they want to do? Or is their entire life structured from morning to evening and you're upset that they're frustrated and they're not following it?
So we're aware that we're raising children who are human beings.
Exactly.
And not just that. Sometimes there's a way you go about raising a child where you make them feel as though they are retarded. That there is no space to think or
exactly.
to be. They have to now become prescriptive, follow my rules, follow my stuff. So I really see that point. But in a sense, with respect to 21st century parenting, where we're having to navigate schedules, the absent parent can also be emotionally absent. It's one of the things people talk about. One of the questions I really want us to look into is homeschooling. Right now, there is a lot of conversation around parents considering homeschooling. Are there pitfalls? And if any parent would want to settle for that idea, what should they look out for, right? Because again, in society, you might want to do homeschooling, but are you equipped for it? What does it require to even succeed in homeschooling? And is it fit for every child, every kind of child?
Well, it depends on what your intentions for the child is. So I put it in 3 places. I would say, what exactly is your philosophy behind what you want your child to learn? What methodologies do you have that you want to execute? What are they backed by? What, in terms of qualifications, do you have to raise this child? What bodies are you collaborating with? It's a lot more than just getting a lesson teacher to sit down with your child to work, because again, you still have to think about all of these things. Raising the child is not just about the academic aspect in the classroom. There are other things that pull into place. I know that a lot of homeschoolers say, oh, it's not about being social. I can build play dates, and all of these things to build socialization with the child. But you have to think about all of that. What is socialization for your child now that you are alone in your house with the child working this homeschooling structure? And most importantly, assessment. So am I in a bubble? Is the child really getting the milestones that they're supposed to achieve? Because most homeschoolers would say attached to a community, attached to some bodies, some academic bodies, just so that you know what the milestones are, you know what the expectations are, that you know what exactly the child is supposed to be acquiring or showcasing or progressing at in that level. I know that parents see homeschooling as, for example, I would say if you want to go into homeschooling because you think it's easier and cheaper, you're in for it's a surprise.
Actually,
because it's not easier. First of all, you have to build the structure where your child sees you as a teacher and then a parent. Most times, teachers who are parents find it difficult teaching their own children. So they get tutors for their children.
Yes.
Because the expectations are always going to be different. A teacher...
It's almost the same way most times, as a doctor, you're not allowed to operate a family
Exactly.
member.
There's the conflict of interest. Exactly. There's so many attachment, passions. Like a teacher is trained to, to have a poker face. Your expression, your energy, you exude frustration. The child is not learning anything. So you really need to be able to say that I am capable of doing this. Even for a trained, seasoned teacher, it's still very difficult to train your child. Even for someone like me who has been teaching for so many years, I still say that when I have a child, I'm going to find a teacher I can trust, because it's a different thing when it's your own flesh and blood. So, but some people have been able to hack it, to the best of their ability. Some people have AI structures or online programs that the children run with that help with the academic aspects. So what they just do is help with play dates, take the child to the park, to museums, to field trips. And that system also works as well. But to be a homeschooler, you have to be present. It's not something that somebody can do for you, because it's still school. If you're still delegating into someone, then it's school. It's just a different form of school as such. So I would say it depends on your philosophy, it depends on your methodology, and it depends on your assessment, but you have to be very aware of the assessment.
You spoke about AI. I want us to take that on. Do you see a future where AI will replace teachers? And what would be your relationship with AI?
I see a future where AI will enhance learning, right? I still think that there are some things that, until they're able to identify how computers can tap into emotions and energy of human beings, would be very difficult to delegate to AI, as a person. I'm not saying that this is not something that could be possible. I'm not into that. But as long, you cannot take the humanity away from teaching. That's the thing. There's sometimes when children are just not in the mood to learn because they're hot, because they're stressed. There's sometimes they're nervous. Sometimes there's a block. There's a self-esteem issue there. Like, there's so many things that go into teaching. I have a boy who spent 3 years not knowing how to read. I actually have 2 cases like that. Anyways, and everyone thought it was a problem with the methodology and things like that, but mostly it was a problem with personality. And also, he had a speech challenge. So he found it stressful to read, but he actually loved to read because he would come in with books to school from home, German, Russian books, from his, heritage. So he would bring them to school every day. And his parents were like, this boy doesn't like to read. And I'm like, if he doesn't like to read, he would be nowhere near a book to begin with. So there's obviously a disconnect there. So those kind of challenges are things that only humanity truly can be able to access, to see that it's not a performance problem. There is a fundamental traumatic situation there that needs to first be first be dealt with or heal before a child can absorb. And in a week, the boy was reading.
Wow, this is
Just like
interesting.
that. Like his mom could not believe it. So it's not that he hadn't been acquiring all of the skills. It's that the trauma was not allowing him to
It's getting in the way of
express
expression.
the skills that he had acquired. So for me, that is truly my standpoint.
It's a food for thought, I think. But again, back to one of the questions I always wanted to ask you. You're president for a day. What would you change about the educational system?
The educational system takes a lot of time to change. So I would say in a day, what I would do is to endorse what summer schools are supposed to be. I've always thought that it's very traumatizing for a child to spend all of these weeks and months in school only to go into a summer school that just repeats the same thing of academics. Yes, they cover it up with cooking classes and all of these classes, but they're still more or less in the structure of the child being told these are the things that you have to learn. So I feel if a child should go to a summer school, they should go to a summer school where they're able to experiment with things that they would like to learn as opposed to things that they have been told that they have to learn.
Okay, lifetime note as we bring this to a close. If there's a book that has defined or shaped you, what book would that be?
As a person, as a teacher, which one?
As a person, really? No.
As a person, I would say The 6 Types of Working Geniuses.
Interesting. I haven't read that, but I think I would like to look out for it.
I love that book.
If you had a soundtrack that could define your evolution and your life, what music would you pick?
That I have to think about for a while. Well, there's a recent song that I started that I have been, it's been like at the back of my head. I would say it's called People's Pleaser. And it just talks about a person who has spent most of their life trying to shape it around making people happy, pleasing people and getting them happy. And I feel like it's something that most first starters have suffered growing up. We call it the first daughter syndrome. Yes, it's like your life is not your own. Your life is for every other person. And so I just felt like that's a song that just keeps reminding me that I'm supposed to evolve, to grow, and to really determine what exactly life is supposed to be. And I can still do that and be kind.
Okay. Go back to your 15-year-old self and give her an advice as we wrap up. What will be your 15-year-old advice?
I still remember where I was when I was 15. So, I was secondary school. Yes, I was trying to fit in to a lot of things. I just gotten into boarding school and I was about to leave because the school, I was about to leave the school, but it was the first set of boarding school students and all the girls were just popular. And I was trying to fit into, whatever that popularity was. And I remember a friend of mine had just gotten into university. She was told I should pass and I didn't get into school. And what I would tell her is, what I would tell my 15-year-old self would be patient. Your path is different. There is no time or clock or structure as to what progress or success looks like. Right now, what you really love doing is growing and challenging yourself, not necessarily hitting any 100% goals as such. Lay off the obsession with first position and actually get to meet people, talk to people, and build relationships.
Well, thank you so much for coming on board. Hi, guys. So I think this has been a journey, and the interesting aspect of this conversation, we touched a lot. From being a parent, and for every teacher out there, you have an important role in the life of the child, and how that child will show up is fundamentally how you interact and shape them. And it's important to also understand that tools for learning is changing. We're going to see more AI get involved, not to replace, but to enhance learning experience. So if you're going to homeschool, like she said, you want to do it right. Do the homework. It's tough. Are you equipped enough to be both a teacher for your child and a parent for your child? The emotional attachment and expectations can get in the way. So you want to be able to do this right. We also spoke about spirituality for children. Sometimes we tend to just dump stuff on them, but how do we teach and engage kids in such a way that they are co-creating with us, but teaching them how to think, not just what to think, giving them the tools with which they can navigate life as adults, right? It's not just about memorizing factoid and repeating those factoids. It's about knowing the principles getting a grasp of that principles and navigating life from a place of intelligence, awareness. And it's not just teaching your children, but raising their consciousness as well. So there's a lot here that I think you want to sit with. Thank you again for sitting with us and joining us. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, comment, share. We're going to be doing a lot. If you have suggestions, you want us to bring another guest on this show, happy to see what that looks like. But from me to you, see you guys again, and thanks for being part of our journey.